It is officially March, and what would we expect? Nothing but a little bit of madness here. As we speak right now, an upset going down. Number one, Virginia just toppled by Louisville. A huge win for their resume. It's been a wonderful day of college hoops. I'm here, Kevin Sweeney, along with Brad Cavallaro, talking some college basketball today on the CBB Central podcast. Brad, we had day basketball today. I woke up and there was basketball on within an hour and a half of when I woke up. I've been watching ever since. How's your day been, buddy?
It's been awesome. I mean, there's literally nothing better than day basketball, whether it be these November tournaments or now we have some real, truly meaningful conference tournament games here in March.
Yeah, I think we need to petition, like, you know how in college football, like the MAC plays all their games on a Tuesday, so there's college football all week. Well, yeah. I petition that some mid-major conference just takes the L and plays all day games all season. Day basketball. It'd be great for ratings of college basketball junkies.
That's like what the G League does.
Yeah.
They have like 1 o'clock YouTube streams.
Well, I mean, obviously it's been a fun day. I think we'll start with the news I just mentioned. Virginia goes down to Louisville. Just an absolutely unreal win for David Padgett, his club. Brad, does this lock them into an NCAA tournament berth?
I think that we are close enough to Selection Sunday where we can say that Louisville is almost a lock, but they should feel very comfortable. I think this was only their third Quadrant 1 win, which is a little concerning, but they don't really have any bad losses. And a win over the number 1 team in the country is going to hold a lot of weight. What a turnaround by Louisville and David Padgett. This is a game that they absolutely needed to win to bolster their resume. And Louisville's a team who many people had in the top 10 or top 15 in the preseason, but given the circumstances around losing their coach, I think Louisville fans should accept this 10 or 11 seed that they're about to receive.
So we have a problem. Virginia just won the game.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So I had called it because there was a second left and Louisville had the ball. I don't know what happened, but Virginia just won the game. They got the ball back and did a buzzer-beating 3.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I don't even think that we should start the podcast over. Let's leave that in. It's a nice time capsule.
Yes. So we will continue with this podcast going live here. Virginia wins 67-66 on a buzzer-beating 3 by, I believe, DeAndre Hunter. Yes, it was. Yeah. Offensive foul by Deng Adele on the inbounds play gets Virginia the ball back. They're the team of destiny, Brad. Unbelievable. Virginia has beaten Louisville. Ignore the intro to the podcast. Just a crusher. So now that we have Brad's take on whether Louisville was in with a win.
Well, actually, just reverse everything I said right there. They don't have enough resume wins now. They need to do work in the ACC tournament if they're going to make it. Yes, just take everything I said the past few minutes and flip it around.
Unbelievable stuff. Yeah, so we called the game too early. This is somewhat reminiscent to me to last season when I called on Twitter. I wasn't watching the game and I saw the game go final on St. Bonaventure beating VCU, and then I tweeted out that Bonaventure had beaten VCU in a huge win, and then my mentions got flooded with "this game isn't over, VCU's gonna win," and I was just so lost. Just some unbelievable stuff. Just seeing some incredible tweets from people trying to sum up this thing. Just craziest ending to a game people have ever seen, and so it's too bad we missed it, I suppose. But an unreal win for Virginia. Like I said, kind of a team of destiny here, and certainly a crusher for Louisville, who had them right there in the closing seconds against the top team in the country, and that would have, I think, put them in the NCAA tournament. So, any more thoughts on what just happened, Brad?
I will say that I'm a huge DeAndre Hunter fan for Virginia. I think if he were to go into the NBA draft this year, I think he could even crack the late first round. And I think for next season, he could even sneak into the lottery. He's a very athletic kind of combo forward who can shoot it. He's a good defender. He does a lot of things really well. And I'm pretty sure that Virginia redshirted him last year because of defensive struggles. And now I'm pretty sure he's one of their their top defensive players. So that's always something that is very very interesting to see.
Yeah, he certainly wasn't happy to redshirt from what I've heard, but certainly has helped him. He put on some weight, which he definitely needed to do. And now he's such an interesting prospect, as you said, because he can defend really 1 through 4 in the modern NBA. He's super long and athletic. He can shoot the 3 a little bit. He can take it off the bounce. So he's certainly a really interesting prospect. The story of the day until this game, before we get into some conference tournament previews and I guess some recaps, we've had a few games now in conference tournament play, was at Arizona in Tucson. The stunning news: Sean Miller will be back coaching these Arizona Wildcats, and Alonzo Trier will be back with him. Just an unbelievable day for Arizona fans, probably waking up this morning thinking there was no hope, seeing that there was a press conference and assuming a firing or a resignation or even a personal leave of absence type of situation. And now we've got a conflicting report with Sports Illustrated saying that ESPN's report is false, and certainly the implications there go far beyond this story. But what are the ramifications of this move going forward, Brad? And what do you think these Wildcats can do come tournament time?
So this story is almost as interesting as that ending to the UVA game that we just missed. But for Miller to be retained, Arizona must have so much confidence that he is going to be proven innocent. And I've seen a couple theories about what this theoretical wiretap phone call could actually entail. I've seen some people say that maybe it was Dawkins offering Sean Miller money to get DeAndre Ayton to join the Andy Miller agency. And I've also seen a theory that it wasn't for Ayton at all. It was about Brian Bowen. And that's why Sean Miller was so indignant that, like, I've never, I didn't pay for any of these players that are, like, on my roster. He had something in his like, exact wording that would suggest that, he didn't actually pay for the player because the player didn't actually come. I think if you remember the Brian Bowen recruitment, it was between Michigan State and Arizona, but Miles Bridges returned, and then Trier and Riley Alkins returned, which totally opened up Bowen's recruitment, and saw schools like Creighton and DePaul and Oregon, and then finally Louisville all kind of jostle for his services. So that's a very interesting wrinkle to the story. As far as Arizona's tournament chances, now that their full rosters back, I think they have as much talent as anyone, so they have a chance in this single elimination tournament to really put together an impressive run.
Yeah, I think the point you make about possibly connecting it to Brian Bowen makes a lot of sense. I think, especially when you look at the report that Pat Ford and Yahoo had shortly thereafter, the wiretaps of Michigan State potentially orchestrating some sort of 2-for-1 deal or a payment plan for Brian Bowen with Christian Dawkins. So, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head as well with talking about Sean Miller's wording on everything. He's always like, I never spoke with Christian Dawkins about paying DeAndre Ayton. And it's like, well, I'd love to hear. I've never spoken to anyone about paying anyone. But, I mean, I don't think anyone should come away with this thinking, oh, Sean Miller is clean and he's been the victim of the system and victim of ESPN. I certainly think this report is bad for ESPN. It's really bad, especially given kind of their reputation right now in terms of in media from fans in general. And I think this is a bigger story that transcends beyond just college basketball. But certainly it's just an interesting situation to follow going forward. I think Sean Miller certainly not in the clear yet, but just some wild stuff. And then Trier returning is so huge. I don't think it's that surprising to anyone that he is back. I think a lot of people thought that drug test, and I know we discussed it with your mom's expertise, that it could be kind of a missed test and a bit of an error on that side. So him being back is certainly huge. They need his scoring punch. And so certainly just a massive day for the Arizona Wildcats.
And it's also interesting, too, that with the original FBI news in like September, there was this thought that Miami and Arizona were in a bidding war for Naz Little. I think that the Miami side of the like wiretaps and in the documents were that they were trying to get some more money from Adidas to like make another push for him. I think that was like the understood explanation there. So it is also possible because supposedly Arizona had offered 100,000 for him. That this call could also be about Naz Little.
Yeah, and I think we also have to consider Javon Quinterly in terms of he was another guy who he committed to Arizona. Then the situation came out. He decommitted and then was absolutely silent about everything. And I think most people believe he's in the documents in that first September situation. Most people believe that Javon Quinterly was one of the players implicated here. So, I mean, I certainly think Arizona is far from in the clear, as we said, but certainly a big day for them and certainly a big day for Sean Miller. Sean, if you're Sean Miller, you have nothing to lose, right? I mean, you go out there and you say, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, and fight this thing to the death and see if we can find some proof that he did something. Because if he just goes down right now, I think he's still screwed anyway. I think a lot of people would say he's damaged goods and wouldn't touch him. And I don't think people are going to look upon lying about this situation that poorly against him. So certainly, I think this is the right play if you're Sean Miller. Kind of interestingly enough.
And then another interesting note about this is I know Darren Ravel reported that Sean with the wording of Sean Miller's contract, he would get more buyout money if he were fired with cause than without cause, which is mind-boggling to me because if his agent really wanted to negotiate that, wouldn't the Arizona athletic director think to himself, why is he being such a stickler that he wants money when he gets fired with cause? Like, is he expecting to get fired with cause? So I don't really understand how a negotiation could reach that point.
Yeah, and it's definitely a weird contract if that's the case. I know that's how Ravel has interpreted, and a lot of people in the media. I know I did read one column from another person in the business legal side of sports who was saying that they interpreted the contract a different way. But I mean, if that's the case, then yeah, I mean, what a mess of a contract by Arizona. And we have to remember this Arizona athletic department as a whole is kind of in shambles. There was a situation with Rich Rodriguez in football, and they've got a lot of problems to deal with. And so this is certainly not one they wanted to add to the table, but it looks like they'll be dealing with it. As we said, I think this is far from over. But I would say, I mean, Arizona has all the talent in the world, as you said, and they'll be certainly dangerous. Currently battling with Stanford right now. We'll see how ready to go they are tonight.
Yeah, so I think moving on to the Big Ten tournament, which had, Wednesday we just had 2 games in the kind of the preliminary round, and then today we had a round of teams that had a first round bye, and then the teams that won the preliminary. So we had some good games. We had Maryland and Wisconsin was the first game. Wisconsin won that. They are playing much better of late. I think they've kind of figured out a solid rotation. This is a team that lost 2 key players in Dimitri Trice and Kobe King early in the season to injury, and they had a very long slide. And I think this is going to be their first year in 20 years that they haven't made the tournament. But it is still encouraging that this young team was able to rebound and turn around their season and move on to a game tomorrow against Michigan State.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin, I've actually watched a fair amount of them of late, even though they're not necessarily the most exciting team to watch. I think they've really kind of figured out what I had hoped they'd find early in the season. I knew this team was going to be very Ethan Happ-centric, and they were going to kind of go as far as he took them. But, they needed to find an offense that would have some space for him on the floor. And they've done a better job of that, surrounding him with shooters, kind of running that 4-out, 1-in offense that allows Happ to do a lot of things. He can pop out to the perimeter, put the ball on the deck, have someone else go down the post, especially Iverson. He can do some stuff in the mid-post areas, who's a more physical guard. And so I think this Wisconsin team has a chance to give Michigan State some trouble. They challenged them just recently on Sunday. I mean, it'll be certainly a tough game, but I think it's kind of quelled, at least for me, any concern that I had that, Greg Gard was some terrible coach. And this was kind of a narrative that went out during this kind of crazy run that Wisconsin had where they were really struggling. And I think it's kind of wrong. I think it's unfair to Greg Gard to criticize him this much in a season that everyone knew really would be a rebuild. But once again, credit to them. And this Big Ten tournament is going to be really interesting to me. Iowa really competed today against Michigan. There's a huge one. That's such a huge battle, though, with Michigan and Nebraska tomorrow. Nebraska has so much bubble hopes on the line in this tournament, and obviously Michigan State in a battle for a 1 seed, and Ohio State's a really good team. Penn State trying to steal a bid, so it's gonna be really fun to watch this Big Ten tournament. I know there's been a lot of complaints about the New York City thing, something I really don't care to get into too much, because I think it's I just think it's a joke. But it's going to be a fun tournament. It's been a fun one so far, and I'm looking forward to more of it.
Yeah, I think anyone who thought that Wisconsin was going to make the NCAA tournament this season, like in the preseason, their only logic could have been, they've made it the past 20 years or whatever. Like there was nothing on this roster to suggest that they would, make the tournament. It was a clear rebuild, and Iverson is a guy that I've always liked whenever I watched him. It seems to me, basing it off of like Twitter, like from Wisconsin fans and stuff, he's someone who you like if you see him every once in a while, but a Wisconsin fan who watches every game, I think seems to be very, very frustrated with him. But another very strange thing about this Wisconsin roster is they have so many big men that were pretty highly ranked or pretty well thought of that just have absolutely contributed nothing this year, and they've actually gone to a walk on in some instances in the past few games over these players.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly been some recruiting misses, and I think that's not to absolve Greg Gard of blame. He has not landed all the recruits he's needed to, and I think you make a good point on Iverson. He's a bit of a frustrating player because you see a guy who's 6'5", so athletic as he is, and you just said sometimes you feel like he makes plays that are kind of boneheaded, really can't shoot the three, which hurts their spacing. But he's a contributor in the right system. I thought Nate Reavers gave him some really good minutes today. Played 19 minutes, only 4 points and a rebound and an assist, but he played within, I thought he just played a really solid game. He had a nice little I think it was a turnaround jumper that I was really impressed on. And I think he's got a bright future next to Hap, potentially in the front court. I like Aleem Ford a lot, the redshirt freshman. It's going to take time. And you have to remember this team is without Demetric Trice and Kobe King, two guys I think a lot of people expected to have a big impact in the backcourt. Demetric Trice as the starting point guard, and then King, a guy who could score the basketball off the bench, 6'4" guard from an in-state kid who a lot of people were really high on. So I think the future is somewhat bright for this Wisconsin team. I think they do have some holes that they have to fill, but they're making a run and they're playing their best basketball in March. I think that's all you can really ask for if you're a Wisconsin fan in a rebuilding season like this.
Yeah, I think if Hap stays for his redshirt senior year, I think Wisconsin would be a projected NCAA tournament team in the preseason. I think Trice was probably their second best player, so losing him made a pretty big impact. Not as much of an impact to be the difference between a tournament bid and where they finished, but maybe they would be in the NIT with him. And then in terms of Maryland, who they beat in this game, what a disappointing season for Maryland. They had three really good sophomores. They had Justin Jackson, who got hurt maybe like 10 games into the year, and he wasn't performing up to expectations when he was healthy. And then Anthony Cowan and Kevin Huerter have both taken a step forward. I'm a huge Kevin Huerter guy. I've had him in the first round of my mocks since the start of the season. He played on the U19 team. He's got great size. He can really shoot it. He can put the ball on the floor. I think he's like 6'7" for a 2-guard. So Maryland definitely has some pieces. I know that a lot of their fans are frustrated with Mark Turgeon, but I'm not sure that firing him would quite be the right move at this point.
Yeah, Maryland's got a really good recruiting class coming in as well. So if they can hold on to this entire core right now, that's a team that could absolutely be a top 25 team next year. Obviously, Turgeon has had his struggles in his tenure. I think you do hold on to him for one more year, though, and just give him a chance with these recruits that they've got coming in. I know they have some really good talent coming in to kind of complement what's a nice current core of Huerter and Cowan, Justin Jackson, Bruno Fernando, if he stays, is a guy who I think has unlimited upside. And then Daryl Marcel has had a really nice season as a freshman. Can't really shoot it yet, but a 6'4" wing who can defend and rebound. But yeah, as you said with Huerter's a guy I've been following since really like junior high. He actually grew up a town over from me. And is only a year older than me. So I've kind of monitored his career the entire way. Watched him blow up over an AAU summer, and just such a good kid, such a hardworking kid. So it's great to see from that perspective that he's gotten himself to an NBA prospect range. I definitely agree with you. He's a lights out shooter, one of the best in college basketball. He did a great job with some of those straight line drives today. He's getting that floater down, which is really key for him. I think he's a better team defender than people give credit for. He's never going to be a plus man-to-man guy, but I think he's got a role on an NBA team eventually as a kind of a 6'7" kid who can put the ball on the deck and rebound and defend a little bit and do a lot of different things for your club. So really good kid, really good basketball player from out at nearby to my home, Clifton Park, New York.
And wings are at such a high demand, especially in terms of the NBA draft. Like if you project out a mock draft like through the second round, there's so many teams where it's like, oh, they could use a wing. And then you kind of look at the wings who are available, like the seniors and some of the international guys, and it's kind of leaving you wanting more. So these guys that are underclassmen, guys like Kevin Huerter or like Quentin Rose from Temple, or even a guy who I'm not super high on, Marcus McDuffie from Wichita State. All these guys, have a pretty firm spot in at least the second round, just because with the way the NBA is moving and in the versatility, so many teams need wings, and practically very very few teams need true big men anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it is a thin thin wing class, as you said. I think Kevin will stay in school for one more year. Just kind of my read on the situation. I think he can really develop in that 1 year, and I think he can really shine with more talent around him. But yeah, he could definitely. I think he could be drafted in the late 20s. I mean, to be quite honest, I think a team could absolutely use him. It says, we need a shooter off the bench who's going to be smart player for us and not make mistakes. I think that'd be kind of the perfect fit there. But looking ahead to this Big Ten tournament tomorrow, another 4-game slate at MSG. Wisconsin will take on Michigan State at 11 Central, 12 Eastern. About 2:30, we'll have Michigan and Nebraska, a huge game. Penn State and Ohio State at 6:30 Eastern, and then the 9 Eastern tip-off between Purdue and the winner of Rutgers and Indiana. Rutgers winning that game as of now. What do you like in that slate tomorrow? What's the game you really have your eye on, and kind of any bold predictions for tomorrow, Brad?
So I think Michigan and Nebraska clearly has the biggest stakes. I think you can make a case about the Penn State and Ohio State game too, but with Penn State's 2 wins over Ohio State that came with Mike Watkins in the starting lineup, he's their starting center. He's like a redshirt sophomore. He's a very good rim protector and like very powerful, post player. He is out, at least from my understanding. He's been out the last 4 games, and Penn State's gone 1-3 in those 4 games. Even though all the games are against tough teams, still they are not the same team without Watkins in the lineup. So I think Ohio State, will win on their 3rd try there. But the Michigan and Nebraska game, such huge stakes for Nebraska. This is a team. Their only win over a tournament team is Michigan at Nebraska. So the resume is really lacking, and they desperately need this quality win away from home. And even a win here might not be enough to get into the field. They may even need to beat Michigan State on Saturday.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Nebraska does need not only this Michigan game, but I think they would need to beat either Michigan State, or if they were to beat Wisconsin, and then in a potential championship game, then it's a one-off. I think actually they'd have to beat Michigan State if they lost to Purdue or Ohio State, let's say, in the conference championship game. I don't think it does it for them. So it'll be interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this Nebraska team responds. I think they have a really good chance. Michigan played overtime today against Iowa, kind of exposed a little bit, I think, by Iowa's aggressiveness off the bounce, got them into foul trouble. I think that's something that Nebraska has a chance to exploit with guys like Glenn Watson, guys like James Palmer, even a guy like an Isaac Copeland, who's a bit of a mismatch for this defense that Michigan wants to play. So it'll be a really interesting game in the afternoon tomorrow. Certainly looking forward to that one. And who knows? I'd love to see Rutgers, if they can find a way tonight to beat Indiana. I know they're leading as of now. can they compete? I think if they're playing a Friday night primetime game in the Garden, you'd hope that the Rutgers faithful would show up, kind of make it a road game for Purdue. And Purdue struggled a little bit with Rutgers this season. So maybe just maybe they find a way to compete in that one. That would certainly be an upset for the ages if we see Rutgers running into the Big Ten semifinals.
Yeah, and I think that Nebraska is, you mentioned, Isaac Copeland, James Palmer, Watson, all in Isaiah Roby too. All these really good kind of multi-dimensional players. The thing is, in terms of that matchup, I think, Michigan with Wagner on the inside, I think he could really take advantage. I know that the kid Jordy Chimanga used to be the starting center, and they went to the smaller lineup. I think that Wagner could really take advantage. He's not the most physical guy. He's more of a skilled guy, but he does have a post game. Interesting note about Isaac Copeland is he was always one of my favorite players. Those past 2 seasons, I thought that Georgetown was going to be really good with Copeland in the lineup, and he just never really developed as expected. And now that he's at Nebraska, he's actually playing really well. So that's a pretty neat story right there.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a fun team to watch this year with Nebraska. Tim Miles came into the season kind of on the hot seat, and he's done a really good job. I do have kind of one question about Michigan. Today was one of the times it's been exposed, although they were able to find a way to win. How do you feel about a team's 2 of their 3 primary ball handlers down the stretch of a game being such horrific foul shooters? Charles Matthews shoots it at 53%. Xavier Simpson right around 50% at 49%. How do you trust a team down the stretch when their point guard and their leading wing scorer both can't really shoot foul shots? Is this something that's a concern for you in March?
That's a very good point, especially because Simpson, he's someone who can shoot threes, and he's kind of a steady, like a steady floor presence. So it is very surprising that his free throws are that low. And then Matthews, he's an athletic kind of slasher guard. He's not much of a a perimeter shooter. Abdur Rahman is their starting shooting guard. He's a guy that I really like. So maybe he's the guy to get the ball at the end of the game. He's a senior. He was a very, very underrated recruit. He barely had any attention at all, and now he's one of the best players in the conference. So maybe that's a guy that you go to down the stretch. And also in a full court pressing situation, a guy like Wagner, he's skilled and he's someone who could flash to that foul line and catch the ball and get fouled in a press break scenario, which would avoid having to have Simpson or Matthews miss some free throws.
Yeah, I trust John Beilein, I will say, over most coaches in terms of playing to his team's strengths and protecting them against their weaknesses. I think that's such an underrated thing to look at in March, is which teams and which coaches are going to do that. I trust Beilein to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan, with this doubt that kind of comes in over maybe a lackluster performance today over Iowa, goes out and just demolishes Nebraska tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if Nebraska wins. So it should be certainly a fun one. Brad, before we wrap up the Big Ten, who do you got winning this whole tournament? As it wraps up, I believe the championship game will be on Sunday afternoon at Madison Square Garden.
So I picked Ohio State. They aren't necessarily playing their best ball right now. They had some trouble with Indiana on Friday, but I really like their multi-positional wings. I know when they beat Purdue, the way that they neutralized Isaac Haas in that bigger Purdue team was they put Andre Wesson, who is a kind of a 6'7" small forward, kind of combo forward, and he really competed and fought to front Haas and not let him get good position. So that level of versatility with Jayshawn Tate, who's one of my favorite players in the conference, and Keita Bates-Diop, who I think won Big Ten Player of the Year. And then they have Cam Williams, who's an excellent shooter, and they have some pretty solid point guard play with C.J. Jackson, and even Andrew Dockich is actually a pretty good player. I know his dad gets a lot of crap from a lot of fans, but Dockich, he's not a scorer obviously, but he makes some smart plays. He's a pretty fun player to watch. He makes good decisions. But I think that core of like 7 or 8 guys, and then Caleb Wesson in the post too. He really impressed me over the weekend. So that kind of core and that ability to play different styles, I think Ohio State's a pretty safe pick.
That's a good call. I really can't debate it too much. I rolled with Michigan State. I just think they're so talented, especially athletically. I think the front court's versatility is a big challenge for Ohio State and for Purdue. And you trust Izzo in March. I mean, you hate. Obviously, there's been some buzz around this Michigan State team all year, but you trust Tom Izzo's teams to execute in March, and this team is so talented. It's certainly going to be a fun tournament to watch coming down the stretch. So I think the next segment we wanted to do today was kind of go through every mid-major tournament that is on. Basically, we're going to go through it based on the first week of Jerome picks. Obviously, a fun thing for all college basketball fans to get involved in is kind of just picking conference tournaments. So I'm just going to run through them in alphabetical order. We'll spend a few minutes on each tournament, just kind of our thoughts, who we think are going to win the whole tournament. And so we'll start off with the America East, which gets underway this weekend. Weird tournament. It's a campus site one, but it starts this weekend. Actually, the championship game not till next weekend. Brad, any takes on the America East?
So Vermont is one of my favorite teams to watch, and they just got one of their best players back, Anthony Lamb. I think he played only like 10 or 11 minutes in their most recent game. It was his first game back from a broken foot, I believe. But they have a very good mid-major center in Peyton Henson. They have a very experienced point guard in Trey Bell-Haynes, and then they have shooters. Ton of veterans. They were, I think, 16-0 in conference last year, 15-1 in conference this year. I think, the problem with picking them is everyone's going to give Vermont their best shot. Every team is an underdog, and teams in the past like Albany have given Vermont a pretty good game. But, I think they have the most talented team. They're one of the most experienced, and overall, I would definitely go with the Catamounts.
Yeah, I'm rolling with Vermont as well. As you mentioned, Lamb coming back is kind of the icing on the cake, if you will, for this team with they're so talented. Trey Bell-Haynes now a two-time America East Conference Player of the Year. Just a tremendous career he's had in Burlington. And I think the other thing you have to remember is they'll play every single game in this conference tournament on their home floor. It's a campus site tournament, which can only help. That gym gets really packed up to the gills, even especially in conference tournament season. So it'll be a tough place to play. These seniors won't want to go out any other way than a championship. So I'm picking Vermont. Although the semifinal game, I think that'll be set up likely between Albany and Vermont, because Albany fell to the 4 seed this year, even though they have a super talented backcourt. That could be super fun. I think that's probably the biggest hurdle. I don't necessarily trust a UMBC or Hartford to challenge Vermont in the championship game setting. Moving on. Yeah. Anything else, Brad, from the America East?
I would just say that, I love how their final is. I think it's at 11 o'clock on that Saturday, so that it is a nice window to watch that game. And I would also like to mention, what a job UMBC has done to turn around their program, and they're led by Jarius Lyles, who's a big-time scorer, former VCU player, and their coach Ryan Odom kind of has it rolling up there, or down there, really. But.
Yeah, shout out to Ryan Odom. He's done a great job, and shout out to the America East for always giving us some morning basketball on our Champ Week Saturday. Rolling right along to the Atlantic Sun, our first conference championship game date is set already. The Atlantic Sun has had 2 rounds of conference tournament play already. They play the championship game on Sunday. Will be Florida Gulf Coast hosting Lipscomb. Brad, who do you like in that one? I picked Florida Gulf Coast. I just think they're a little too talented. But this Lipscomb team is really intriguing with a pretty powerful offense.
So with my Jerome picks, I went with Lipscomb just, because you can't pick all the number 1 seeds. Florida Gulf Coast is definitely the most talented team, and they have a ton of veterans. But I went with Lipscomb. They have Garrison Matthews, who might be the best player in the conference. He's kind of a all-around go-to scorer for them. And they're clearly the second-best team in the league. They finished at 10-4. They did finish the year with 7 straight wins. They were a team that, if you looked at RPI very early in the season, they had a very gaudy RPI. I think it was in the double digits at one point. They obviously kind of fell back to earth there, but I think you can't go wrong with picking either Florida Gulf Coast or Lipscomb. I'm just going with Lipscomb, just as an attempt to not have all number 1 seeds winning.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty dry tournament so far. Florida Gulf Coast had some early trouble with both North Florida and South Carolina upstate, but pulled away in both ball games to 20-plus point victories. Lipscomb pretty much cruised today, won by 15 over Jacksonville. This game wasn't ever that close. Handled Stetson as well in their opener. So I think we kind of went into this tournament knowing these two teams were the two top dogs, and they will certainly go at it in the conference title game. To me, the key for them is in this one is Florida Gulf Coast defense. This is a team, when they get stops on the defensive end, they're pretty tough to beat. They're undefeated this year when they concede fewer than 75 points. So when they can, lock in defensively, which will be certainly a challenge against the Lipscomb offense that can really fill it up, especially with Garrison Matthews, one of the more talented scorers in mid-major basketball. I think the Eagles do find a way to get it done.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Florida Gulf Coast's backcourt of Brandon Goodwin, Zach Johnson, and Christian Terrell. Especially Christian Terrell, I think he's a very underrated player for them. And they have a couple former VCU big men with Simmons and Gilmore at the center position. But yeah, that would kind of wrap up anything with the Atlantic Sun. Moving on to the Big South, which is I think the next one alphabetically. Mm-hmm. I actually wrote a preview about the Big South conference over the weekend. We're down to I've seen 3 games go final. I've seen UNC Asheville, Winthrop, and Radford all win. I don't know who won that 4th game.
Still in progress.
Still in progress. That is why I don't know who won. But who'd you have coming out on top in the Big South, Kevin?
So I had a bit of an upset here. I took the 5th-seeded Liberty Flames. They currently lead Campbell by 13 at the U16 media of the second half, if the CBS Sports app is up to date. But this is a team that kind of had the talent all year. They've been up and down. They've had some rough performances, but at the same time, they've shown some flashes of brilliance, beat UNC Asheville on the road in overtime recently. I mean, this is a team they've got tons of good guards. Georgie Pacheco Ortiz is a really talented sophomore point guard. Ryan Kemwright's a veteran in the backcourt, as well as Lovell Kabil. Scotty James is a sophomore big man who's really stepped up this season. So, I mean, this team has the talent to do it, and I really couldn't see a team that would dominate. And we saw that today with the results. UNC Asheville wins by 5 over the 8th-seed Charleston Southern. Winthrop wins by 4 over the 6th-seed Gardner-Webb. And Longwood Lancers challenged Radford, the number 2 seed, but couldn't quite pull the upset. So certainly it's been an even tournament so far. Liberty looking for the first seed line upset, if you will, in the tournament tonight as we speak. But certainly an interesting tournament for sure.
Yeah, so I ended up going with UNC Asheville to win. I think it is worth noting, though, for the semifinal, the Radford-Winthrop game, very contrasting styles. Winthrop is 27th in pace, while Radford is 345th. So we're going to have one of the faster paced teams in the country. They also have one of the best, I think the best player in the conference, Xavier Cooks, who kind of reminds me of like a Tyler Honeycutt type of player, or maybe even like a Nick Minerath, who used to play at Detroit Mercy. Cooks is kind of a combo forward, but more of a 4. He can shoot it. He's very athletic, especially for the mid-major level. So Winthrop, I think, would also be a good choice. I went with UNC Asheville. They have one of the up-and-coming coaches in the low to mid-major level with Nick McDevitt, who's led them to the top quarter finishes in the conference the past few seasons. And they have 2 really good players, Machio Teague and Ahmad Thomas. Thomas kind of reminds me a little bit of Deshaun Murray for Auburn at Presbyterian, which is another Big South school. And Teague is kind of a combo guard who can kind of do it all. He can score, handles the ball a lot for UNC Asheville. And I think their mix of talent and shooting with their solid coaching, I think, gives them an edge here.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I certainly like UNC Asheville. It's a really good team, and shout out to Maceo Teague picking rookie of the years in these types of conferences are always difficult just because there's so little recruiting information on these guys. But last season, I rolled with Maceo Teague to win Rookie of the Year. He backed me up with 15 points a game. So shout out to Maceo Teague. But UNC Asheville's a really good club. They could certainly do it. I like this Winthrop team, and Radford's a team that's kind of been slept on all year, and they found their way to the 2 seed in this conference. Ed Polite's a guy, kind of a throwback player at 6'5", but more of a traditional 4-man, but he can space the floor a little bit. He can do a little bit of work off the bounce. He's super athletic, averages over a block a game, almost 2 steals a game. Just a really solid player. That kind of does it all. So I think most people will be picking Winthrop tomorrow to knock off Radford, but it's certainly it's a dangerous team, this Radford team. So it's going to be a fun conference tournament, and who knows what'll happen tonight with Campbell and Liberty. I know last year Campbell, Chris Clemens went for 51 in the game against UNC Asheville to pull the upset. It's always a fun conference tournament, I feel like, even though it's usually a 14 through 16 seed league.
Yeah, definitely. Just checking where UNC Asheville is projected to be seated. Yeah, they're, according to Bracketville, which is the guy Dave Oman does it. He also does the bracket for NBC Sports. He has UNC Asheville as that last 15 seed, which means maybe they could get up to the 14 line, but probably more of a 15.
Yeah, and I think most would be on the 15 or 16 line who win this tournament. Just looking at some RPI numbers real quick, but I think that's all we have on the good old Big South Conference. We'll transition now. We already touched on the Big Ten to the CAA, and this is another tournament that I'm really looking forward to coming up this weekend. College of Charleston basically hosting the tournament. It's not on their home floor, but they are playing in Charleston, South Carolina. Kind of a spread out league geographically with Northeastern and Hofstra up in the Northeast, and then all the way down to the Carolinas with Elon and North Carolina, Wilmington, College of Charleston. So who do you like in the CAA, Brad? It's a wide open league, in my opinion.
So in the preseason, I actually had College of Charleston in my top 50. I thought that they were going to be kind of this year's Middle Tennessee, where they would challenge for an at-large. But unfortunately, their second-best player, Gerald Brantley, he missed a lot of the non-conference, and I think even some conference play, which really set them back. But they're still 14-4. They're still in first place, and I'm still going with Charleston here.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really argue with that. This is a really, really solid Charleston club. They play tremendous defense. Great coach in Earl Grant, and they have 2 guards in Grant Riller. And who's the other guy? I'm blanking on the name, and I really shouldn't be.
Chile.
Oh, yes, exactly. Joe Cheely, just a tremendous backcourt duo to go along with Brantley. So a really solid club. I'm actually rolling with Hofstra here, a team under Joe Mahalik. They have one of the elite scorers in college basketball in Justin Wright Foreman. Averaged about 25 points a game. Hofstra's been playing really good basketball. They've won 5 out of 6. I will say I'm rooting against my Jerome pick here, and I'm rooting for William and Mary in this tournament, because they are members of the Never Made the Tournament Club, one of those 4 teams that were around since Division I's inception, or since the NCAA tournament's inception, and have yet to make the NCAA tournament. Northwestern scratched themselves off that list last season, hoping William and Mary can this year.
Yeah, and they've had some very good teams. I remember, what was it, maybe 2 or 3 years ago? It was William and Mary and Hofstra, I think, had this awesome conference title game, and I think William & Mary had Marcus Thornton, who was drafted by the Celtics. I may be mixing up my years a little bit, but both those statements I think are true. Just might be different years. And then Northeastern's also worth mentioning. They've won 7 straight. Their coach Bill Cohen is a very underrated coach. I think he's an Al Skinner disciple, and they actually tied with College Charleston at 14-4. A couple of teams that I was kind of disappointed with, Towson and Elon. I thought both of those teams could challenge that kind of not quite the top, but in that next tier, and both finished below 500.
Yeah, I was stunned to see Elon come in last. I think this is a team that maybe limited talent-wise, but I thought was just a solid team with a lot of experience. Did not expect them to kind of plummet into 10th here. But this should be a really fun league. Northeastern's a team that I really like as well. Cohen's done a great job. And how about Vasa Pusica, a transfer from San Diego, who has become their starting point guard at Northeastern and averages 17.5 points, 5 assists, 3.5 rebounds, shoots 50% from the field, 42% from 3. just a tremendous pickup. And that's kind of how Cohen has lived in his tenure there, is finding guys who are maybe under the radar and building just a really solid program every year. So that tournament gets underway on Saturday with some play-in action. Sunday, a full day of quarterfinals. Monday, a full day of semifinals. And then Tuesday night, conference championship game. The CAA, of course, not on ESPN. Not sure exactly the history behind that, but they have no ESPN contract. So one of those conference tournaments you'll have to find elsewhere. I think probably either NBC or CBS Sports gets the rights to that championship game.
I think it's CBS now, but it definitely was NBC a few years ago.
Close enough for government purposes. Transitioning on to the Horizon League, another really fun tournament. Wish I was in Detroit this weekend. Brian, I must say I'm kind of missing the chance to get to a conference tournament this year. I'm used to being able to head to the MAC tournament out in Albany, but out here in Evanston, Illinois, no conference tournaments in Chicago this year. St. Louis is about a 5-hour trip away, so it doesn't really make sense for a day trip and can't really swing a hotel for a weekend. Same with Detroit, bit of a haul. So unable to make it to a conference tournament, but I'm looking forward to action in Detroit this weekend at Motor City Madness, Horizon League. I'm rolling with UIC. This is a super talented team that's played some good basketball of late. Little concerned how everything works out with Dikembe Dixon announcing he's transferring at the end of the season. Kind of a weird timing on the move when you're trying to make an NCAA tournament push, but a really, really solid club. And once Tarkus Ferguson came back, they've played as well as anyone in that conference.
Yeah, and that's a shame because Dixon was only a sophomore, and then Ferguson's a sophomore, and I think their only real impact senior was Ty Odiaze, who's their center. But they're a very good team. They lost 2 straight games to close the year. They were in contention for that regular season conference title. I went with the number 1 seed again. I went with Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky broke through last year. I think last year was their first year that they were even eligible to make the NCAA tournament, and they ended up winning the conference tournament. They have a very, very talented, very skilled kind of stretch 4-man in Drew McDonald, who's been their best player the past 2 seasons. And I think that this is a legitimate top 100 team in college basketball, and I think they could maybe scare a high major team with the right matchup. Looking at where Bracketville has them, he has them as a 15 seed right now, but the top 15 seed, which with conference tournament attrition, is probably more of a 14 seed.
Yeah, I definitely like this Northern Kentucky team. John Brannon's done just a wonderful job building that program, kind of from the ground up. They have a pretty strong fan base now, just doing everything the right way. But I'm really looking forward to this tournament because there's so much that can kind of get messy here. You talk about Northern Kentucky. Wright State's a team that's kind of been forgotten about all year. They're sitting here in second place. They played really well. They have the coach of the year in Scott Nagy. He's done a great job with this program. And then there's kind of the silent but scary Oakland Grizzlies with one of the best mid-major players in the country, only guy in the last 25 years in college basketball to average 26 points, 3.8 assists, and 4.7 rebounds is Kendrick Nunn, former Illinois player. So talented. They don't have Martez Walker, who's injured. This team's been brutalized by injuries, but it's certainly a team I wouldn't want to play in a one-game setting, if nothing else, but for the play of Nunn.
Yeah, Oakland is way too talented to be 10-8 in the conference.
Yeah, it's been a really tough year for them. I know they had injuries, they've had suspensions, they've had chemistry issues. Just kind of everything's fallen apart for a team that was expected to be so good.
Yeah, and I know that Greg Campy likes to kind of take second chance guys and stuff. And I thought that Stevie Clark was on this team, but it looks like he left after the season. He was a former, I think even top 50, definitely a top 75 recruit who went to Oklahoma State and got kicked out after a year. I thought that he was going to be like a major impact player in the same vein as like a Martez Walker who transferred from Texas, and Kendrick Nunn who transferred from Illinois. But yeah, I think that lack of a point guard is kind of holding them back a little bit.
Yeah, that certainly hurt them this season. They could have used a point guard. I know Clark just didn't really work out. I from what I've heard in the chemistry there, and I think that's something you have to deal with when you are taking those second and third chance guys, is making sure that if the chemistry isn't right, that they find another home, because you're dealing with a lot of personalities and a lot a lot of issues as it is. But transitioning on to the AA MAC, the MAC tournament out in Albany. The single A MAC has their tournament next weekend, but this weekend got started tonight. Actually, the MAC tournament in Albany. Had to watch from afar as my hometown Siena Saints fell to Quinnipiac. Jimmy Patso's maybe in trouble there, but that's a story for another day. Who do you like in the MAC tournament here in downtown Albany?
So I also wrote a MAC preview recently, and I went with the favorite, the Rider Bronx. I saw Rider play in person earlier in the year, and they were very impressive. Jordan Allen, I believe that's his name, the guard.
Freshman scoring guard.
Yeah, he hit some really big shots. I was really impressed with him. And then Demencio Vaughn has been arguably their best player this year. He's kind of a 6'5", 6'6", kind of multi-dimensional wing, only a redshirt freshman. So he has a very bright future. And then they have two very athletic big men that can compete with a high major team that they could potentially see in the first round. Frederick Scott, who's a transfer from DePaul, who can also step out and shoot the ball. And then Tyre Marshall, who's a 6'9" center. Both those guys can, they have the athleticism to compete with like a 3 seed or a 4 seed's front court.
Yeah, we touched on Rider a little bit on this podcast, either 1 or 2 episodes ago, and just how good this team is. They're really athletic. They share the ball. But unfortunately, history is going against them for 2 reasons. Number one, Kevin Baggett, the head coach at Rider, who is pretty well respected in the MAC, has never gone past the quarterfinal in the MAC tournament. They've kind of been snake bitten in that regard. And then the number 1 seed in the MAC tournament has not won its conference tournament since 2010. Siena finished their three-peat in 2010. Since then, not the single 1 seed. So Rider battling not only their own personal history, but number 1 seed history. That'll be certainly fun to watch. Niagara's got a chance if Matt Scott plays well. You never want to discount this Iona team, although they've had some struggles of late. And then Canisius is a team that has, in my opinion, the best player in this conference in Isaiah Reese, a guy who averaged about 17 points, 6 assists, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, does a little bit of everything as a 6'5" guard from Miami that Reggie Witherspoon grabbed late in a building class when he just had arrived at Canisius. Just an unbelievable pickup that's paying dividends now. That should be a fun tournament. It always is in downtown Albany. So looking forward to that one. And then headed out to Arch Madness in St. Louis. One of my favorite conference tournaments. You, Brad?
Oh, yeah, definitely, especially because it's one of the first ones to have that championship game.
Yeah, so I like Loyola Chicago here. We've discussed them on the podcast as well, a team that I'm super high on. Can really score the basketball. I will have full disclosure that the Rockin' 25 poll that we both vote in, we don't release the entire poll until tomorrow afternoon, but I will say I voted Loyola number 21 in the country. So I'm super high on them if you guys weren't sure about that. They're the clear pick for me. But it's always a tough tournament, and I know SIU is going to be competitive, and Illinois State's got talent. So what are your thoughts there?
I have also picked the Ramblers to win this one. Just not a lot of real standout teams. I know Illinois State is in the midst of a rebuild. Drake and Bradley are kind of on their way up, and then Missouri State was a team that really disappointed. They have the best player in the conference, Elise Johnson, who really showed out well this summer at some of those either Nike or whatever shoe company camps. But Northern Iowa was a team that if we were talking in December, we would say they were the clear favorite and potential NCAA tournament at large team. I don't think I can remember a team whose bottom fell out mid-season like the Panthers. It was unbelievable. So I also have Loyola Chicago winning this.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's been kind of weird with Northern Iowa, and I will say I don't think Loyola Chicago wants any part of Northern Iowa tomorrow. I know they've struggled this season to the 9 seed, but I mean a 9 seed in this conference was still a 7-11 mark in league play. They did play fairly tight with Loyola, or in one of the games, I believe, this season. Yeah, 60-56 against in the earlier of the two meetings this season. The second one was a blowout in Chicago. So that'll be an interesting one tomorrow. I believe some day basketball. We'll see. But I'm certainly looking forward to this tournament. As you said, I think there's a tier by themselves in Loyola, and then a bunch of teams that have the talent, I think, to beat Loyola once. But that's what makes college basketball so great, is that there's enough. You can pull an upset in one game, and I certainly hope Loyola would get an at-large bid if they didn't get in, if they didn't win this tournament. I'm not confident they will. I don't know about your thoughts on their resume, Brad.
Yeah, so I'm not a huge. All right, so you'll see like across Twitter, whatever mid-major team has a gaudy record, people are always like, well, they deserve to be in. And there's a general sentiment where people say, oh, we want these regular season mid-major champions who won all these games, not these Power 6 schools who finished 500. And I just don't like black and white rules like that. Having said that, I like a case-by-case basis, and Loyola definitely passes the eye test for me, as does Middle Tennessee. Teams like Boise State, I'm not a Boise State guy at all. I would not, want them to get an at-large, and same with like a New Mexico State. Both those teams haven't really impressed me, but Loyola and Middle Tennessee are probably, in my eyes, the two most impressive teams of that kind of vein.
Yeah, I agree. I think just they passed the eye test, but I agree that we shouldn't really operate too much in the black and white. Moving on, the NEC tournament, not sure there's too much that either of us have to say on this one. Mount St. Mary's was upset yesterday. That was a big blow. That was certainly wide open league now, but I think Wagner is the favorite here. That's my pick. Bashir Mason's done a really good job with this club.
Yeah, so this is a conference that has been absolutely decimated by the transfer market. Their best players have been leaving like crazy. I know Bryant lost their two best players from last year, both transferred to Nevada, as did one of Wagner's best players, if not their best player, in Corey Henson. And Mount St. Mary's lost a player to Texas and a player to Miami. So it's so tough to come back from that, especially as a low major league. That's why the NEC is one of the worst conferences, if not the worst conference. No matter who wins is probably going to be a 16 seed. I think Wagner would have a chance to avoid that playing game, but the other three would most certainly be in the playing game. I just hope Wagner wins, so that's one more mediocre team in the NIT, as opposed to having Wagner in the NIT and then a Fairleigh Dickinson or a Long Island Brooklyn in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. It's certainly going to be an interesting conference race to monitor and follow. Once again, a campus site tournament, so that's always something to watch for. I've done some research on that last season. You guys can check that out. I'll probably bump that on Twitter over the next couple of days, of how campus site tournaments haven't really shown any sort of difference in home court advantage between those neutral site tournaments and home teams playing on neutral sites. Like, for instance, last season where Siena was playing at the Times Union Center on their home court against Monmouth in the MAC tournament. So the stats are there that it's not a huge impact, but always fun to watch those gyms, especially at the smaller levels, get packed up for a big game like that. Transitioning on to the Ohio Valley, most people kind of see this 2 to 3 team race. I'm rolling with Murray State, super talented team, fun backcourt. Really looking forward to this conference tournament. I know they've gotten underway yesterday and today with kind of buys. I know they have a double buy system for those top 2 seeds that always is interesting. I know Belmont's lost the last 2 years after getting the double buy early in the tournament. So it's an interesting tournament as always. I'm rolling with Murray State. Who do you like, Brad?
So I actually am going with Belmont. In terms of the tournament overall, I think the Ohio Valley is probably my favorite mid-major conference tournament, just because it's the first one to end. It's the first bid punched. So that's always very, very cool to see. And I think that the double bye system is an excellent idea, especially to quell kind of the people where it's unfair that these top seeds, they work so hard in the regular season and they get this great record and then end up having nothing to show for it. I think giving them a better chance of winning the automatic bid is so beneficial to your conference as a whole because you can get the best teams representing yourself in the big dance. And it's not realistic, at least in my opinion, to ask for a conference to send their regular season champ because they need the exposure and the money that comes with playing on national TV in these conference tournaments.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot more conferences need to find ways to protect their top seeds, but at the same time, we've seen it not work in the past. Where Belmont, maybe it's not best that they get a bye to a semifinal round when they're going to play a team who, yes, they did play the previous day, but a team who has a little momentum. Where Belmont's been sitting around for 2 days, going to shoot arounds and watching games and hanging around at the hotel, getting nervous. Jacksonville State, for instance, last season pulled that upset. They were playing basketball and they were getting energy, they were getting momentum. And so I think it's an interesting situation. I know there's certainly not been a way that's been figured out perfectly yet by these conferences. I know the Horizon League a couple of years tried to propose to the NCAA to allow them to do a double elimination conference tournament, which I had very mixed feelings about. Kind of a deep thing to go into here on this podcast, but it's an interesting debate, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think that we should all be praying for this Murray State Belmont final because that has the potential to be a really good game. I know we talked about Murray State's kind of roster, but Belmont has one of the most improved players in the country, Dylan Weinler, who's like a combo forward, like a lefty. He can shoot it. He can play inside. He has some real perimeter skill, and they have Amanze Ekeze, who's a former stretch four that's now more of a complete big man. So the two of them in the front court is a nice contrast to Murray State's backcourt with Ja Morant and Jonathan Stark.
Yeah, really, really fun game that could be. I certainly hope that's what we get, although I'm never opposed to an upset in conference tournament season. So moving on to the Patriot League, Bucknell, the favorite here. That's who I roll with, another 1 seed. I know I'm not very exciting, but Bucknell to me is kind of in a class of their own. I just don't see how anyone matches up with Zach Thomas and not a foul in the front court. What are you seeing here in the Patriot League in another campus site tournament?
So kind of like with College Charleston, as crazy as it sounds to say a 16-2 and 23-9 overall team was a little disappointing. I was kind of disappointed with how Bucknell played in the non-conference, which I think will affect their seed. They returned, I think, all of their team from last year. That gave West Virginia a very compelling matchup in, I think, a 4-13 game. I definitely like them to win this again. Just checking where they would be projected as a seed. Brackenville has them as a 14 right now, so maybe they could hit that 13 line. But to get a lower seed than last season when you return your whole team, and I think if they played to a capabilities, maybe they could have even gotten to like the 11 line. It's got to be a little disappointing, but at the same time, for a mid-major school, to make back-to-back NCAA tournaments, you can't really quibble too much with that.
Yeah, for sure. And they did get a big challenge tonight from Loyola Maryland, gave them pretty much all they could. 83-78, the final there. Zach Thomas went for 27 and 11 in that ball game, but Andre Walker went out with 17 points for the Loyola Greyhounds to keep them around in this ball game. So it'll be interesting. They have Boston University, who played a really solid game against Lehigh. They have them on Sunday. That'll be a fun one at Shokia Pavilion. So looking forward to the Patriot League, another tournament that I believe does not have ESPN rights. So we will be looking for that one. I believe it was on CBS Sports Network last season. So look for that one, I believe, on Tuesday night or Wednesday night of next week.
Yeah, I think that one's usually on the Wednesday night. That's another night where we have, I think, multiple automatic bids being televised at once, which I'm not a fan of. I think that we should try to get as many, standalone conference championship games as we can. But moving on to the Southern Conference, I believe is the next one that we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
East Tennessee State has stranglehold, ended up losing 3 straight. That was a team that was a surprise to be at the top anyway. They actually lost a lot of talent from last year. And UNC Greensboro, who won the regular season last year, also wins the regular season again this year. So, Kevin, who do you have winning the SoCon?
I've got an upset. I'm rolling with this Mercer team, a team that came into the season picked first in this league. Had some problems earlier in the year. They've really figured it out of late, though. They've won 8 in a row. So a team that's really rolling. As of late, they have a pretty solid front court. They're pretty versatile. Dimitri Rivers is a senior wing who's at 6'8", 180, kind of a mismatch, but a pretty long kid who does a lot of different things for you. They've kind of changed how they play, kind of been reinvigorated on the defensive end, and they found a way to put the ball in the basket, which has been big for them. A team that played a lot of close games and lost a lot of close games earlier this season. 2-point loss at Furman, 3-point loss at Furman, 2-point loss at Western Carolina, 2-point loss to Citadel, loss in overtime at UNC Greensboro, 9-point loss to ETSU, and their luck has certainly turned of late. With ETSU stumbling, I'm taking the Mercer Bears to pull off a big upset and hopefully some nay-naying after the championship game, just like they did against Duke a few years ago.
I think it's also very interesting to note that Mercer won these 8 straight games without their leading scorer and probably their best player, Rian Holland, a former Wichita State guard. I think overall without him, they went like 8-4, but they won their last 8 games without him. So I don't know what his status is, but the Bears are clearly gelling without them. Personally, I went with Furman. I know that I had Furman in the preseason winning this league, and they've won 6 straight in their own right. They have Devin Sibley, who's a very talented player. I would just like to mention too that preseason I had Samford, I think, in second. I don't know what happened to Samford. They were one of the most disappointing teams. I think they were in the KenPom top 150 last season. Returned their whole team, added Justin Coleman from Alabama, and are 6-12, 10-21 overall. So I have no idea what happened to Samford, but just to say it again, I had Furman winning this league.
I had high hopes for Samford as well. They lost Wyatt Walker, who was their really only big man on this roster early in the season. He was the only big man who plays in the post. That is, and he went out with I believe it was a leg injury of some kind early in the season. I know he missed their 3rd game of the season. I believe it was against Loyola Chicago, which I was in attendance for. My first non-Northwestern game of the year that I did get to see in the Chicago area. And that was a team that did not impress that day. They certainly haven't impressed this season, but they do have a very good backcourt. So a team that you never know, maybe could hit some shots, get rolling and scare somebody in March Madness in the SoCon tournament.
Okay, so then moving on, we're going to touch on the Summit League. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. 2 more leagues, Summit and West Coast.
Yeah, so Summit League, I feel like I'm picking the 1 seed all the time, but I am also going with South Dakota State. That they have Mike Dahm. They went 13-1 in the league, 25-6 overall. They played Colorado very tough. I think they went to double overtime with Colorado. I think in Colorado too, I believe. So this is a very talented team. I think that they could even hit that 13 line, which would put them in a nice spot, or maybe even the 12 line even, to grab that traditional 12-5 upset or the even more trendy 13-4 upset that seemed to be happening more often recently.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun tournament. First and foremost, I'm really looking forward to this one. I hate to bet against the Fighting Dominators, but I'm going to roll with South Dakota and the Coyotes, led by Craig Smith. Matt Mooney is a really talented guard who doesn't get the credit he deserves nationally, averaging 18 points a game, 3 assists, 4 rebounds on good shooting numbers, pretty efficient player as well. So a really solid team. They play good defense. They're an excellent rebounding club, out-rebound their opponents by 5 rebounds per game. And so this is a team that I like in this conference tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe a Denver and IPFW made a little push here, but it should be a fun tournament, that's for sure. It always seems to be out in Sioux Falls, I believe, is where they play that conference tournament.
Yeah, I think that they have like this new facility. I think it's called like the Pentagon, I believe, and I think that's where it's like in South Dakota, and both schools have like a surprisingly big fan base for like the level that they play at. I think it's also worth noting that South Dakota's coach could realistically get that Colorado State job.
Yes, indeed. Craig Smith coached under Tim Miles at Colorado State. Certainly a matchup we could see there where Colorado State is in the market for a head coach. He will certainly be a hot name on the market, especially if he can bring the Coyotes to the big dance. One last league, a league we talk about a lot in college basketball, the West Coast Conference. I've got Gonzaga. I think this is a team that showed that they had the recipe to beat St. Mary's last time out, kind of forcing the ball out of Jock Landale's hands. And this will put St. Mary's in some interesting bubble situations if they do miss out. I'll be rooting for St. Mary's, if you will, just because I want to see them in the big dance. But at the same time, I don't feel sorry for St. Mary's. Let's put it that way. If they don't make the tournament, because it's on them for how they're scheduled.
Exactly. I mean, a team with St. Mary's that has been so good over the past 10 years. I remember I was in, I think, freshman year of high school. They were playing in Providence for the NCAA tournament, and with Omar Samhan, and they took out the Villanova Wildcats with a 2 seed. And then since then they've been pretty much a mid-major power. And that was 7-8 years ago. So they don't have many excuses in terms of not being willing to challenge themselves in the non-league. I also went with the Gonzaga Bulldogs. They're such a balanced team. Really like Jonathan Williams. Rui Hachimura is kind of one of the more trendy, underrated player picks who could be kind of an NBA prospect down the road. He's not a great defender, but he's a really explosive athlete. And then guys like Silas Melson and Killian Tilly is very solid. They can both shoot the ball. They both defend at a high level. So I think Gonzaga is the favorite here. It's worth noting that BYU kind of disappointing this year. Their season kind of fell apart when one of their best players, Nick Emery, kind of a forgotten but weird ineligibility case revolving these paying players like with a booster. So that kind of went under the radar, and that's kind of the reason that BYU is kind of falling off.
Yeah, I mean, they still had a solid season. They haven't completely had their season dismantled, but they haven't really challenged Gonzaga or St. Mary's too much. I could see them pulling some upsets, especially when you consider the fact that Elijah Bryant and Yoli Childs, when you have a duo that averages 35 points a game combined, that'll always put some fear into an opponent. I really thought the San Diego team was one that could surprise, but they're kind of in turmoil right now. Lost their head coach, Lamont Smith, over the weekend. He was arrested in a domestic violence situation. Obviously, I don't know the details on that, so I really don't want to comment too much other than that I had always heard sterling things about Lamont Smith as a person, as a coach. And so certainly a sad situation there. And it might derail this San Diego team that I think had a chance to maybe make a little bit of noise.
Yeah, and I think San Francisco too, I think, was a team in the preseason that people thought more highly of than they actually finished. The problem with San Diego and San Francisco is, no matter how well that these coaches do, and I think that they both have very good coaches. Kyle Smith, the coach of San Francisco, used to coach at Columbia, and he did a great job there. But there's just so little upside when you have teams like Gonzaga and BYU and St. Mary's in the conference with these bigger budgets and bigger brands. So there's not a whole lot of upward mobility. To get an automatic bid, you have to pull off at least two colossal upsets.
Yeah, it's really tough, and I think that's kind of why it makes sense, this discussion of the Mountain West maybe taking Gonzaga and BYU, just because the budgeting is just such a challenge when you look at these tournaments and these teams. It's just such an imbalanced conference, and it's certainly something that we'll have to look at further. I know it's going to be a discussion this offseason when we always have nothing better to do than talk about conference realignment.
I'm actually a fan of talking about conference realignment. I find that stuff extremely interesting, but I agree. Let's save that for a summer or late spring pod.
I love conference realignment. Some people hate on it. I get tired of it eventually when it's just kind of speculation and nothing more. But when there's actually a movement going to happen, I am all over it.
I remember when there were rumors of the Catholic 7 in the Big East merging with the Big 12 and forming like a super conference.
That was so ridiculous. Well, I believe that wraps us up on a Thursday night podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening in to the CBB Central podcast. Whenever you are listening, I hope you enjoy conference tournament basketball all weekend, all week next week, and then the selection show. We'll have a couple more podcasts before then, that's for sure. But enjoy your week of college basketball. Brad, anything to add before we sign off tonight?
Nothing really. I just can't wait for this weekend to come so we can get this first conference championship in the Ohio Valley.
I certainly am excited. Well, thanks so much again, everybody, for tuning in, and have a great college basketball weekend.